Hello, Western Civ 105. I'm talking to you here from Hollywood Road Park here in Hong Kong. And people are doing Tai Chi, eating quietly, taking walks, talking. It's a nice day. It may rain soon, so I'm hoping to get all these videos in before that occurs. Anyhow, it's interesting too that I'm making a video like this in Hong Kong, but as it's now being integrated into mainland China, something like this may not be legally possible in the future, which is a whole nother topic. But it's linked to a lot of the some of the things that we're going to be addressing in the next 2 weeks, which is ideologies and the way that people think that a state should be formed and what kind of rights people should have or not, or the kind of power of a state or not. And so, we have, we're really, we covered the Enlightenment and the idea of absolute rulers. And now we're kind of, and then we went to the Industrial Revolution. And remember, Enlightenment is a very kind of optimistic time period for, at least from the elite's point of view, and at least for many of them. But then we see the conditions that industrialization created. And there would be a response to this by people on many different levels. And some of the things that I want to remind you of is that while we're going to see the beginning ideologies that are going to be associated with left and right politics in modern times, it doesn't always fit perfectly when you look back at this time period. And something that I need to clarify for you all, sometimes a lot of these terms may have slightly different meanings even in different countries, but even in Western countries, by the way. Here's some drilling there. I don't know where that came from, but hopefully it won't be too much of a distraction. Chainsaw, something. I think there's just construction everywhere. Industrialization. Building of civilization. Hong Kong has got so many buildings. It's amazing there's even a park here. Just like endless buildings. But anyhow, so this week we talk about socialism and romanticism as an emphasis in the discussion. I'm going to actually go over socialism more next week, and we're going to do a whole assignment on having you guys nail these ideologies like capitalism, communism, socialism, anarchism, feminism. I will go even over nationalism and Zionism. And these terms are so all over the internet, right? I mean, if you spend any time at all being curious about politics, you're going to stumble into these terms. And you're going to often find them confusing. And so I'm hoping this is going to help clarify as I kind of really talk about these terms. And now, with the popularity of Alejandra Ocasio-Cortez, right, known as AOC because her name, a lot of people say it wrong. I might have actually just said it wrong too. And Bernie Sanders have really brought the word socialism back into American politics. And when I was growing up as a kid in the Cold War years, this is unheard of. This is why, for a lot of older people in America, they're really horrified that, they're seeing, Maoist China. They're thinking of Stalin. They're thinking of Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge, if they've actually studied the history for real, and looking at the Vietnam War. And for the younger generation, this hasn't. There's many of you did not grow up under this, and you're not afraid of this word. And what I would say is, if you know that history of the modern Cold War era, then you would understand those fears that some of the older people have. But I would also argue that what you're going to see is that a lot of the older folks, because the Cold War years were such propaganda years for everybody, both sides, every side, there's no neutral, nuance things going on during the Cold War. And so in the United States, there seems to have been a more anti-socialist point of view than, let's say, Europe, where in Europe, it never was a dirty word. Even communism wasn't necessarily always a dirty word, but what camp you were in. So after the end of World War II, Italy had one of the largest communist parties, but for the most part stayed with the West and did not make an alliance with the Soviet Union. Now, I might be losing some of you on this history. My point is that these terms will help you understand these kind of discussions better. And so and in the middle of that, I want to say that I want to refine my lecture just a little bit, and I'm hoping as you listen to this briefly, you'll see what I mean. I just spent a few months in Europe, and I was having this discussion about socialism there, quite a bit, by the way, because I really wanted to know what Europeans thought and what this word and this concept meant and for the people on the street. Now, this is me not doing a scientific research, just coffee shops, bars, you know. For many of the things that, let's say, Bernie Sanders is asking to have, or his political vision, isn't called socialism anymore in Europe. They call it they call it social democracy. And social democracy is seen as different than democratic socialism. Democratic socialists are seen to be the legacy left over of the Marxists, even the leftovers of communism in many ways, that wanted to make all of society equal. And they've had parties that have tried to really push those kind of agendas legally, without revolution. But the social democrats, more or less coming out of the democratic socialist traditions, don't focus on equality as much as having a welfare state in which everybody's needs are kept, met, and then capitalism can thrive. So this idea that if Bernie Sanders has 3 houses, that he's being a contradiction to these socialist ideas. Well, for social democracy and even for the democratic socialists, the idea isn't that people can't have wealth or that they're something like that. It's the idea that you would still tax. You would tax wealth, but you're not necessarily trying to abolish it. And when I was in Denmark, I saw a lot of mansions. So people are rich there. In the Netherlands, a lot of wealth. And these are under systems that in America would be called socialist. And so, but again, what I find is that whether it's the left or the right in America, what we're calling socialists, many in Europe are referring to it just being social democracy and not necessarily socialist. This gets confusing. And liberal, and I'm going to talk about this again next week. The word liberal in economics means the exact opposite in Europe. So in terms of Western ideology and the ideologies that are coming out of this time period, it can get confusing for those of us in America when we use so many different terms. Let's just think about this. When we say football, everybody else in the world thinks of football as soccer. Only we think of football as the thing that we watch on TV. So we're the only ones that use like inches and pounds and all that stuff, and Fahrenheit. So it just makes sense that we start getting confused as terms kind of move around and alter, especially with us. So I don't really know if I helped clarify things in the way that I would have liked to, but if you're feeling a little sense of confusion, I want to at least explain to you that there's a reason. And sometimes it's even hard for us as professors to try to make a clear and concise way to break it all down for you. Next week, I'm really going to try hard to even add a lecture of me coming in, explaining as much as possible these terms and how they fit into a modern context as well. But I think for now, looking at the history of socialism and Marx and communism, and looking at romanticism and these reactions to industrialization and capitalism will be sufficient. And if you have any questions on these or you want to have a debate with me about any of these things, please do, because I think it's an important set of terms in history to know and understand accurately, regardless of what spectrum you are politically, right? Too many people are saying a lot of things that are misinformed on these topics. So have a great week, and we'll be in touch.